I'm Diane. Standing in the opulent ballroom, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the hum of hushed conversations, I watched as Dr. Victor Blackwood, the once untouchable chief of surgery, crumbled before me. His face, once so full of arrogance, now pale and drawn, as he stared at the clipboard on the marble floor. It all started at the hospital gala. I was standing near the bar, sipping on a club soda. The centerpiece, a grotesque 3-foot-tall ice sculpture of a human heart dripping onto a platter of lukewarm shrimp, was a perfect metaphor for Silverbrook Medical, cold, expensive, and slowly falling apart. I was the director of regulatory affairs. It was a fancy title, but in reality, I was the one keeping the hospital from getting sued. As I watched the donors, old money New Yorkers with facelifts so tight they could barely blink and men who thought sexual harassment was just a bit of fun, I was calculating liability insurance premiums for every potential slip and fall hazard in the room. Then, the doors swung open, and in walked Dr. Victor Blackwood. He was like a force of nature, gliding on a wave of his own ego. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car, and he had that self-assured glow, as if God himself had whispered in his ear. He was surrounded by his entourage, 3 terrified residents and a junior admin named Jake, who looked like he wanted to be Victor in every way. I adjusted my blazer. I hated these events. I had graduated at the top of my class from Yale, with a dual MD/MHA. I had saved this hospital from federal audits that would have shut its doors. But to men like Victor, I was just staff, the help, the background noise to his so-called genius. He spotted me, of course. Predators always sense the one person who isn't afraid. He made his way through the crowd, laughing at his own jokes about some surgical mishap. He stopped right in front of me, grabbed a glass of champagne, and took a sip without even looking at me. His eyes were cold, like sharks in a sea of scotch. "It's a bit cluttered in here, isn't it? Hard to move around with all these support staff," he said, looking past me at a wealthy donor's wife. I smiled my compliance audit smile, the one I use before telling a department head they're over budget. "We all play our part, Victor," I replied calmly. Then, the moment that sealed his fate. He finished his champagne in one gulp, looked around for a waiter, and when he couldn't find one, he held the empty glass out to me. "Dear, empty this trash for me, would you? And tell the caterers the shrimp is rubbery." "Chop, chop, nurse," he said, loud enough for the nearby donors to hear. The word nurse hung in the air like a foul smell. I knew he wasn't using it out of respect. He was stripping away my doctorate, my executive title, and reducing me to a servant. My hand twitched, and for a split second, I fantasized about shoving that crystal flute up his nose. But I'm a professional. I let him hold the glass out, the silence stretching awkwardly. "I think you've confused me with someone who works for you, Victor," I said, my voice sweet but poisonous. "I'm sure you can find a bin. You're good at disposing of things you don't understand." I turned on my heel and walked away. As I walked towards the exit, I wasn't angry. I felt a cold determination, like a judge signing a warrant. "Empty the trash," he had said. Well, I was going to take him up on that challenge. You see, this wasn't a one-time insult. Over the years, Victor had been a caricature of everything wrong with American medicine. He would park his Lamborghini in the expectant mother's spot because he thought he owned the place. He referred to female anesthesiologists as gas girls. I remembered a staff meeting years ago. We were discussing new compliance standards. I was presenting a slide deck on surgical site infection protocols, showing that Victor's team had a 4% higher infection rate than the national average, mainly because they treated hand-washing guidelines as suggestions. In the middle of my presentation, Victor swung his feet up onto the mahogany conference table and said, "Diane, sweetheart, we're surgeons. We cut people open and save lives. We don't need a lecture on soap from a woman who spends her day choosing fonts." The room went silent. The CFO, a spineless man named Greg, who always sweated when there was conflict, laughed nervously. Good one, Vic, he said. Victor continued, the talent is the surgeon, she's just the roadie. No one comes to see the guy who tunes the guitars. Move on to the budget, clipboard Barbie. That name stuck. For months, I'd walk into the cafeteria and hear residents whispering it. It was a joke to them, but to me, it was fuel. While Victor was busy building his ego, accepting awards, and sleeping with pharmaceutical reps, I was in the digital basement. I loved the rules and the red tape because they were what kept monsters like him in check. Every time he insulted me, I filed a report in my own personal encrypted server. I documented everything. The time he threw a scalpel across the oar because the music wasn't loud enough, the time he adjusted a patient's chart to hide a mistake, and the time he expensed a $5,000 dinner at a high-end strip club in Las Vegas as a consultation. After the gala, I went home to my apartment. It was a quiet place with a view of the city skyline. I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat in the dark with my cat, Mistake. I opened my laptop. I wasn't just an administrator anymore, I was a hunter. He thought I was a nurse, that I was there to empty the trash. I pulled up the hospital's organizational chart. Victor was at the top of the surgical pyramid, protected by the board because he brought in millions in donations. But money is like water, it can leak if you know where to look. I wasn't going to get him fired for being a jerk. I was going to get him on the one thing the board cared about more than his talent, liability. I named my new file Project Janitor. If he wanted me to clean up, I was going to scrub this place until it bled. 2 days after the gala, my opportunity arrived. The hospital administrator, Mr. Thompson, had abruptly resigned after being caught embezzling from the cafeteria fund to pay for his gambling addiction. The board was in a panic. They needed someone steady, someone boring. They needed me. I walked into the boardroom wearing my severe glasses, the ones that say, I read the fine print. The chairman, Mr. Harris, looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was an investment banker who treated the hospital like a distressed asset. Diane, he said, gesturing to a seat. We have a situation. With the administrator gone, we're exposed to the auditors. We need an interim compliance officer with executive authority. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried. I know where the bodies are buried, Mr. Harris, I said, sitting down and smoothing my skirt. And I know who dug the holes. He winced. We need a clean sweep. We're hearing rumors about the surgical department. My heart didn't skip a beat, it slowed down. This was it. Rumors are liability, sir, I said, slipping into corporate speak. If there are irregularities in surgery, it could expose the endowment to catastrophic risk. We're talking about massive malpractice suits and federal fraud investigations. Mr. Harris went pale. I knew his weak point, the endowment. What do you need? He asked. I need full autonomy, I said. Unrestricted access to all departmental financials, logs, and personnel files. No oversight from the medical chiefs. I report directly to you, and I want the title of interim administrator while you conduct your search. That's highly irregular. Victor won't like reporting to you on compliance matters, he said. Dr. Blackwood is a brilliant surgeon, I lied. But he's not a risk manager. Let him cut. Let me protect the hospital's money. Mr. Harris sighed and signed the authorization form. Fine, but keep it quiet. We don't want to spook the horses. I walked out of the meeting with a key card that opened every door in the building and a login that could access the digital soul of Silverbrook Medical. I went straight to the IT department. I needed to make sure my new powers were absolute. The IT director, a guy named Tom who wore ironic t-shirts and hated everyone, liked me because I was the only executive who could convert a PDF to a Word doc without calling him. Tom, I said, sliding a box of fancy donuts onto his desk. I need you to mirror Victor's hard drive and give me access to the deleted items folder in his Outlook going back 5 years. Technically, that requires a subpoena, he said, biting into a maple-glazed donut. Technically, I'm the compliance authority, I said, tapping my new badge. Consider this an internal audit. Tom shrugged. You got it, boss. That guy is a jerk anyway. He called my server room a nerd cave. He won't be calling it anything for long. Back in my new office, I logged in. The hospital's financial system was laid out before me. I started with the discretionary spending accounts. Victor's slush fund was very active. I saw charges for medical education materials totaling $80,000. The vendor was a company called Star Logistics, registered to AP. Oh. Box in the Bahamas. I cross-referenced the dates and found that the charges always appeared a week before Victor went on his medical conferences. I pulled up the flight logs. On February 14th, he had a charge for an emergency medical transport consultation to Miami. The passenger manifest showed Dr. Victor Blackwood and Miss Lily M. A supposed surgical assistant. We didn't employ a Lily M. But a quick check of Victor's public Instagram showed him in Miami on that date, with a blonde woman who definitely wasn't his wife. He wasn't just stealing, he was stealing stupidly, with the arrogance of a man who thought no one was watching. But I needed more evidence. I needed the bridge to collapse while he was standing on it. For the next 2 weeks, I was a ghost in the hospital. I walked the corridors with my clipboard, smiling at everyone, approving vacation requests, and fixing the coffee machine in the ICU. Meanwhile, I was setting the trap. I printed out a few of the Star Logistics invoices and accidentally left them on the copy machine in the legal department. I knew their paralegal, a sharp kid named Alex, would find them. Sure enough, 2 hours later, I got a message on my internal chat. Diane, did you leave these invoices? They look weird. The tax ID doesn't match the vendor registry, Alex said. Oh, silly me. Just shred them. Probably a glitch, I replied. I knew he wouldn't shred them. While the legal department started sniffing around the money, I started working on the culture. I went to the scheduling nurse, a tough-as-nails woman named Carol, who had been terrorized by Victor for years. Carol, I said, leaning over her desk. I'm reviewing the on-call schedules. Is it true Dr. Blackwood charges overtime for surgeries he's not even present for? Carol's eyes went wide. I'm not supposed to say anything. He says he's consulting remotely. Remotely? From where? I asked. From the golf course, from his yacht, she corrected. He calls in on speakerphone for the timeout and then bills for the whole 4 hours. Interesting, I said, making a show of writing it down. If you happen to have a log of those calls, strictly for compliance, of course, I could make sure you get that ergonomic chair you've been asking for. By noon, I had a spreadsheet of 50 instances of ghost surgery. That was a federal crime, Medicare fraud. Then, in the hallway of the surgical wing, I was walking with the new HR director, Sarah, discussing new harassment protocols. Victor came storming out of the OR, ripping off his mask and screaming at a young resident, a woman on the verge of tears. You incompetent little waif. I asked for a 3-0 Vicryl, not a 4-0. Do you want the patient to herniate? Are you trying to kill him or are you just too busy thinking about your boyfriend to learn how to suture? He bellowed. The hallway froze. Nurses stopped charting, and patients in beds looked up. Victor saw me and sneered. And here comes the maid service. Diane, make yourself useful and get this idiot out of my sight. She's clearly not cut out for medicine. The old Diane would have looked down and absorbed the toxicity. But the new Diane stopped. I looked at Sarah, who was furiously typing notes on her iPad, and then at Victor. Dr. Blackwood, are you aware that shouting at a subordinate in a patient care area is a violation of Section 4, paragraph 2 of the Code of Conduct? That creating a hostile work environment is grounds for immediate suspension of privileges, I said, my voice projecting clearly. Victor laughed, a loud, barking sound. Suspension? Who's going to suspend me? You. I generate 80% of the revenue in this wing. I am the hospital. Go back to your cubicle, clipboard Barbie. He stormed off. As the resident sobbed, I handed her a tissue. It's okay. He's just loud noise. Take a break, I said softly. Sarah looked at me. That was intense. You're building a case, aren't you? I smoothed my blazer. I'm not building a case, Sarah. I'm building a coffin. The board meeting was scheduled for 7 a.m. On a Monday. The conference room was cold, lit by the harsh gray light of a New York morning. 10 men and 2 women sat around the oval table, the power players in the hospital. I sat at the head of the table. Mr. Harris looked nervous. Diane, you requested this emergency session. You said it was regarding existential risk. I placed a single thick binder on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. Gentlemen, ladies, we have a cancer. Stage 4. And we need to cut it out before it metastasizes to the press, I began. I didn't start with the insults. I started with the numbers. I showed a spreadsheet of the surgical department's discretionary spending over the last 5 years, with a clear correlation to Victor's tenure. Then I showed the invoices from Star Logistics, the IP address tracing back to his vacation home in the Bahamas. One of the biotech CEOs gasped. He's embezzling from the donor fund. It gets worse, I said, my voice steady. I pulled up the ghost surgery logs and the Medicare billing codes. Dr. Blackwood has billed for concurrent surgeries. Unless he has cloned himself, this is federal wire fraud. The penalty is treble damages plus prison time. If we don't self-report this immediately, the hospital is liable for the full amount. We're looking at a $30 million fine. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the HVAC system. I also played a compilation of audio files from the cameras, with Victor's voice shouting insults. We have 3 sexual harassment suits pending in draft from nursing staff, I lied. If these go public, coupled with the fraud, Silverbrook Medical becomes a pariah. We lose our magnet status and the endowment. Mr. Harris looked like he was going to vomit. What do we do? If we fire him, he'll sue. He'll go to the press. He won't sue, I said, closing the binder. Why not? Because you're not going to fire him for the fraud. You're going to let me handle it. Dr. Blackwood is going to retire, immediately, for health reasons. He's going to sign a non-disclosure agreement that ties his severance to his silence. And he's going to pay back the $80,000 to avoid criminal prosecution. He'll never agree to that. His ego is too big, one of the board members said. His ego is his weakness, I countered. He cares about his reputation more than his money. If we threaten to expose him as a fraud, not just a thief, but a bad doctor who fakes his surgical logs, he will fold. I know him. He'd rather be broke than be a laughingstock. The board members nodded slowly. Mr. Harris said, do it, but he can't know it's coming. If he gets wind of this, he'll destroy the records. I've already locked him out of the server. As of 5 minutes ago, his badge only opens the front door and the bathroom, I said. I stood up. One more thing. I want the interim removed from my title today. Mr. Harris didn't even blink. Done. Fix this, Diane, and the job is yours. I walked out of the boardroom, feeling light. I was like the ice sculpture at the gala, cold, hard, and center stage. By Wednesday, my name was on the door, Dr. Diane Reed, hospital administrator. I spent the morning restructuring the org chart. I fired Jake, who was just a sycophant, and promoted Carol to Director of Surgical Operations. Victor had been away at a conference for 3 days. He was due back tonight for the Founder Circle Gala. I called security. Steve, Dr. Blackwood will be arriving around 8 p.m. His badge is deactivated. Do not let him into the staff entrance. Direct him to the main event hall. I spent the afternoon preparing. I wore a sharp midnight blue sheath dress that cost more than Victor's emergency flight to Miami and heels that could puncture a lung. I pulled my hair back. I wasn't the help anymore, I was the executioner. At 6 p.m. I did a walkthrough of the ballroom. The